So let's talk about Marcus. Marcus's school recorded him absent 28 out of the last 30-something days of school, and that brought him onto the radar screen of the St. Louis City Family Court, which is a partner of the Full Frame Initiative for Truancy. 28 days out of 30-something days of school is not going to help you graduate. And he was actually on the verge of being expelled, and there was a whole lot of other things going on. Marcus is a kid of color with a single mom who is struggling to make ends meet. No one in his family that we know of had graduated from high school. There are a whole lot of risk factors that have been shown to be, that sort of put a neon sign in a way above Marcus's head. But this is a kid that we need to focus on to help him see education as a pathway forward. And in fact, that seems particularly important because we know also all the risk factors are there for Marcus to end up in the juvenile justice system as well. And from that system into the adult justice system. And so we can try and interact with Marcus in a way that does show him a way forward through the educational system. But we can also begin to wonder, sort of, is anything else really possible when this starts to happen? Like, how do we move upstream, or how do we think differently about this? And what I want to point out is that most of what we often see when we see Marcus in a situation like this is what we need Marcus to do differently, what we need Marcus to think differently, what we need Marcus to hear differently. And what I'd like to suggest is that actually the thinking, the hearing, the doing differently started with the court and showed up via the court officer. Because instead of starting out with what was wrong with Marcus or what happened to Marcus, etc., this is a court officer who started out with what mattered to Marcus. And you know what mattered to Marcus? What mattered to Marcus was education. You may say, how is that possible? He's missed 28 of the last 30 days of school. Look, wait. What mattered to Marcus was education and family. And neither of which you would know from connecting the dots based on the normal kinds of dots that we connect. But here's what was really going on for Marcus. Something had happened in Marcus's community that had made his, showed it was more dangerous. It had become more dangerous. And Marcus had also gone to high schools, graduated from middle school and gone to high school. But he had a younger sister who was not in high school. And those of you who have teenagers know that high school buses come before middle school and grammar school buses. And Marcus got on his bus before his little sister. But because there was something going on in his neighborhood, it had stopped feeling safe for his little sister to wait for the bus alone. And so here is what was happening, is that Marcus was waiting for the bus with his little sister, putting his little sister on the bus, and more days than not, walking quite a distance to school. But he was getting there after homeroom, so he was marked absent. But he actually was going to school, and talk about a kid motivated to go to school. But he cared about school, and he also deeply cared about his sister. And the response of the system to Marcus and this framing of a kid who cares about education and school was not then to say, you know what, Marcus, we need to talk to you about how your sister has to fend for herself, or why it's your mother's responsibility. I'm sorry that she has to leave for work so early that she can't put your little sister on the bus. She needs to find another job, right? Because that might be another way of addressing this. The response of the system, because they were starting out what mattered to Marcus, and they were starting with what we would call a well-being orientation, was to recognize that there's so much working in this story, and there's one little piece that's not working. And so the response was for the juvenile officer who was working with Marcus to work with the mom to find a neighbor, a trusted neighbor. And now in the morning, Marcus takes his little sister to the neighbor, and he gets on his own bus, and the neighbor puts the little sister on the bus. And that's what it means to start with people, and that's what it means to start with possibilities. And in this particular case, there was no additional program needed. What was needed was a solution to a problem that wasn't apparent, because we have all been taught, because of risk factors and other things, there's very specific things that certain things mean. And really opening up our eyes to the fact that that we're always talking about people and possibilities takes us to a fundamentally different place. This is not about one deputy juvenile officer being nice or going out. This is about a system. Right? That deputy juvenile officer is now part of a system that is shifting its whole culture and its assumptions about kids and families and communities.